Okay. So the question was, you want to restate the question one more time?
Well, I mean, I was referring to that thread you posted where that, that European elitist smartass guy was kind of bashing on like American LARP and stuff, and you were just talking about like how we try over here, and there are the three different types of groups who are getting there, but some do and some don't. And the first group you described is the group that doesn't get there, the group that just kind of burns out, because it just never progresses. And you described them as wearing blue jeans and using duct tape weapons, and maybe only being just 10 to 20 people, and they may have events every week, but eventually they do burn out because it doesn't progress. At what point did you know that your group was going to progress past that point?
How was a big step you took, or
Yeah.
how did you push it?
Yeah, how'd you push past that point? At what point did you realize, hey, I've got a great group here,
Yeah, when we first started out, we had the same typical scenario of lots of low immersion, blue jeans, duct tape weapons, and what really kept our focus going on getting deeper into the immersion was us as elders constantly were telling the players, look, these games, here's what we want to do. Here's the scheme. Here's what we want to do with YLARP. We want to make these things, 1,000+ people events. We want it full immersion. We want you to step into this game and feel like you're stepping into a fantasy medieval world. And you can't do that when you got blue jeans on. We understand that it takes time. We understand it takes money. We understand that this isn't for everybody. And we'll host games, light immersion games. A colony can host all different types of games. But what made us successful in progressing from light immersion to medium immersion was that we communicated with the players on what our goal was. There are some groups in LarpCraft right now that will probably never make it out of light immersion because their player base is either too young or too broke to go into the next level. And that's fine. And that's why we made the immersion levels, to point out, hey, look, we're a light immersion group. That's what we are comfortable with. That's what we want to do. And that's fine, because there's a lot of groups out there that want to do that. And, you got to start somewhere. And almost everybody can start out as light immersion. Spend a few bucks, make a few pool noodle weapons, do your social media up like we tell you how to do it, and boom, you'll have 5-10 people in almost no time. And then, that's going to lead to the group leaders as to where do you want to take it? Do you want to go further? Do you not want to go further? And it may come to the point where, maybe you split the colony because the colony, half of the members just can't do it and the other half really want to do it. So those are some issues that can be resolved by, or, half the group only does the light immersion. And I mean, you can do it any way any way you want. And that's why we defined the immersion levels. Because I know, like, if I'm going to go to a light immersion game, I'm not bringing my armor. If it's hot outside and nobody else is dressed up, chances are I'll just, come in my paladin ranger outfit, not my decked out tanker outfit. So, I mean, what we were trying to do with the immersion, like trying to get people to say, okay, this is a traditional immersion game, this is a medium immersion game, this is a light immersion game. When you're posting it on your social media, when you're posting it on your Google Calendar, when you're doing that, it tells the players how to prepare for that game. I know a lot of light immersion games that we did have, and you can see them in the earlier videos. A lot of us did dress up because we knew we were going to medium and traditional immersion eventually anyway. So we'd wear things all decked out, while everybody else was in jeans. And we get bashed on by full traditional immersion groups for those videos all the time because they don't, and I don't blame them for bashing us. Excuse me, bashing us, because they don't understand what we were doing. And without understanding, once it's explained, we got 20 new people. Half of them are in jeans. Well, I didn't want to send 20 people away from the game. The game will just have to suffer this one time, and they'll just know how to do it the next time. Everybody still pretty much has fun. We haven't had too many people in a game that have stuck their nose up and said, well, nobody's in costume, I'm leaving. We haven't had too much of that stuff, so.
With can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, just double checking. With Menaki Battlegrounds out here, I mean we're light immersion, but I try to encourage people to come out in their garb and stuff like that. And I mean, for the most of the practices, I'm going to be coming out in my garb, and for Relius, and I think you have somebody else with you, Relius. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Kale's here with me.
Okay. But one of the easiest ways to be able to build up garb and stuff like that is with Goodwill, man. Seriously, if you look at my profile picture, I know this stuff it's really low key looking, and it's not as cool as some of the other stuff you'll see, but everything you see in that picture was purchased from Goodwill. So except for
Let them know it's you. This is
this
Kale's questions.
yeah,
I'm just listening right now.
This is Kale. It's funny you would mention that Neander. Is that it? Because
yeah.
because Thursday I'm actually hitting up the Goodwill because that's what I was trying to tell my fiance, who's also kind of getting into this with me. We're looking at materials to make some costumes, and I'm like, well, before we because neither of us really know how to really make clothes. I mean, she knows how to sew, but she's never really done measurements and made clothes to fit someone that don't look janky or in proportion. And I told her, well, before we do this and buy all these materials and whatnot, why don't we go to Goodwill and see what we can get, because I had a friend who went to Scarborough Fair, who's gone to Scarborough Fair for 2 years now, and that's how she got her, her Scarborough Fair get up. She bought all of it at Goodwill, and that's what I told her. So Thursday, that's what I'm doing, actually. So I just thought it was funny you would mention that.
Oh no, it's definitely a good idea. Okay, I found if you look at the picture, you'll see I'm wearing a leather poncho thing. And I actually found that at Goodwill, and the front part of it in the upper chest area was filled with completely with embroidery and lots of flowery, foofy stuff. And it took me a week and a half to pick it all out, but it was worth it. I trimmed it down a little bit shorter, and I'm actually about to be sewing a cloak that's attached to the back part of it. So, but yeah, everything in my costume came from Goodwill. Even the belt stuff I used to make the over-the-shoulder frog, so that the leather strap that goes over the shoulder and has the little sword frog on the hip part. But yeah, I got the belts from that and everything. So Goodwill, great place to go.
Yeah, I mean, if that doesn't work out for me, I mean, it looks like my only other resort is going to be buying a very low budget Robin Hood costume off the internet somewhere, and not that that won't look nice or won't look you know traditional or like it won't make me look like a ranger in some way. I know it will, but that's going to be my other resort if this Goodwill thing doesn't work out. But I got a feeling if I can really get creative and and just use my imagination a bit and I don't mind settling and I know this is just how in the beginnings and I'm going to do whatever it takes, then I feel like it'll work out great.
The other part of it too is when you start doing this and you get some of the gear, you like you said, I know how to sew and stuff too, but I don't know how to tailor stuff. So um, you start to learn that stuff and you start to watch YouTube videos on how to make that stuff. And the $40 tabard that you see online really is what, $5? worth of material, depending on what color and stuff you get and where you get it on sale. Buy a whole bolt of something, and you can make really cheap stuff. And that's what a lot of our groups are doing is, when something goes on sales at a Walmart or Joann Fabrics or Michaels or whatever, when they do their big blowout sales, they just buy a whole bunch of stuff and make it for cheap, and then they can sell it. A lot of times players will want it after they've used it, and then they charge 20, 30, 40 bucks. Unless they're at the Ren Fair, then it's 50 or 60 bucks. You can, if you ever buy anything at the Ren Fair, expect your price influx to go about 20% higher. Anything at a Ren Fair will be 20% or higher in cost because it's convenient, it's there, you can try it on. A lot of times it's worth it, like for boots and stuff. I love buying them at the Ren Fair because they got 700 pairs there. I can make sure they fit right. Sure, I'm going to pay 300 bucks, but they'll last me for 10 seasons. So, it's all, I'm not saying the Ren Fair is a bad thing, but you can definitely start making, and making a tabard. What is that? That's 2 sewings. That's 2 stitchings. Once you cut it out, it's patterns are super easy for those, so that you can start with those in no time flat. But
sorry to cut you off, but I've been also looking at, not only am I looking into costume, but I'm looking into like weapons, and of course, I don't really have the equipment or like maybe even the time like Relius does to make this kind of stuff, and or the patience to wait for it to eventually look nice after I mess it up 500 times, So I'm probably gonna end up buying a lot of my weapons. I was wondering, do you know if Dark Knight Armory's weapons are of high quality? I know a lot of people recommend Kalamazoo like right off the bat. They're gonna tell you there, but I don't really. At the moment, I work at Walmart, so at the moment I don't really have like 200 bucks to throw away on a sword. I'm looking at paying I think 50 bucks for a sword that looks pretty nice and it's got a fiberglass core and it's treated foam and I think it has something on the it's treated with something on the outside of the foam. It says it doesn't wear and tear, but I'm not really sure. I was just wondering if you've bought any, because I've read your weapon reviews on the forums and I didn't see anything from Dark Knight Armory, so I don't know if you've bought anything from there, and if you have, I don't know if you could tell me anything about it, or if anybody here could tell me anything about it.
first off, Dark Knight Armory is owned by Museum Replicas, or Museum Collectibles. And you'll notice that there's tracking systems, and when something's not available on one site, it's not available on the other site. I think Medieval Collectibles bought out Dark Knight Armory, which makes sense because they're probably the largest supplier in the United States. They have a wide variety of things, including Kalamazoo, and their object is to perform as best they can as a online retail store. I am against them because I don't get along real well with museum collectibles, or medieval collectibles, but customer service wise, they're pretty good. Shipping's pretty fast. On the retail side, you don't see much of an issue. Some of the returns are iffy, and products from like Epic Armory and such, we stopped carrying a lot of those. The leathers were getting less and less nice, and a lot of their latex weapons were pretty good. They stayed consistent, but we're having supply and demand issues and a bunch of other stuff. So that was the long-winded answer for, yeah, they're probably pretty good.
Also, for short term, being is you said you worked at Walmart, right?
Yeah, I work at Walmart. I work at my local Walmart's Connection Center. I do phone contracts and fix phones and sell them and stuff like that. But yeah, I work at my local Walmart.
Well, great thing about Walmart, plenty of access to pool noodles. I mean, I know they're not spectacular, but they're great for starting out, and they'll do the job until you can get something better.
And like Relius, he's got quite a bit of foam crafting knowledge already. So, building these things together will be pretty beneficial. But and you have discounts at Walmart, and Walmart is now reintroducing their fabric section. From what I hear, I don't know if it's the same way down there, but they took out fabrics and now they're back in the stores. I don't know if you know that or know anything about that, but that's kind of nice to have such a large store that has fabric.
Yeah, our store, actually, when they pulled the fabric section out of a lot of stores, the particular store I work at kept their fabric section. They didn't pull it out of our store, so we've always had fabrics. And, some are a little pricey per yard, but they got that clearance bin, man, at $3 and under, $2 and under, per yard. It's not that bad.
And what's cool about a lot of the stuff for like barbarians and, piece that stuff together, sew it together and make it all piecework. That gives such a unique flavor to a costume when you can do that. And it'll be so unique. But we've spent a half hour on this tavern talk already, and we haven't talked about magic, which was the main point of this tavern talk. And I haven't assigned any experience points to anybody either, which is another point of this tavern talk for everybody being here. But we will assign that, no problem. But this is a great, these tavern talks can go whatever way you want them to go. We just got to make sure we don't go over an hour. And, thanks for everybody for coming in and being part of the conversation. It's important when we start a group to answer a lot of these questions. And as LarpCraft, the elders of all these different groups can band together and, use this teamwork to help each other build great games. Whether you're in it for just a club experience or you want to actually make this thing a job, you can do that in most areas where it's supported. So, yeah, that's definitely been a good introduction. Should we move on to the magic section? I'm not going to mute anybody. You can just pop on in.
What about the magic stuff?
Well, the magic section was what the tavern talk was supposed to be about this evening.
Oh, okay. Oh, actually, yes. I have a question for you that does involve magic, but it kind of crosses over into another section as well.
All right. What is that?
All right. You know the guild I designed, Dragon Souls, right?
Okay.
One of the things I wanted to be able to do with them, and I haven't posted anything about it because I wanted your opinion and or go ahead. Is there are 10 different dragons listed. Each one is respectively a different color and stuff like that. I was wondering if it's possible that each one of them have like a very low level magical ability. For example, like gold dragons. I pictured them being kind of like the paladins and stuff, so they'd have like a heal ability or something.
Okay, let me just stop you right there a second.
Sure.
Are there going to be dragons in the game?
At some point, when I can figure out a way to work them in directly into it, yes. As it is basically each character has a dragon soul inhabiting their body, in a more or less pretty much symbiotic relationship. Kind of, it bestows like certain knowledge and beneficial abilities, and I've kept it to a very low number of people able to actually have them.
Yeah, it would be confusing from a system standpoint for that to happen. Dragons are a big part of the medieval fantasy lore, but when you try to implement dragon stuff on the ground actually in a game, it never works. In very few LARPs, if you look at all of the other LARPs that are out there, even the ones that have dragons are so cumbersome they can't do anything. So it takes away from all of the really cool epicness of a dragon when you try to emulate a dragon and put it into a realm and it looks really lame. So that's why we kind of came up with a character that, we came up with a race that is like a dragon, but it's not. It's got attributes of a dragon because so many people wanted to play a dragon character. Uh, it was our way of saying, okay, this is the costume requirement, but you're still not a dragon, so you can still role play it pretty well.
Well, this with the dragon souls is they're souls of long since dead dragons. They just habitate. I'm not sure if that's the right word. They will cohabitate in a person's body. The race doesn't really matter. They can't be undead though, and it like I said, they just kind of pass on little bits of knowledge from way back when. Nothing that would pertain to modern days. And it's more of a thing to kind of spice up a character and stuff like that. Though over time, a person does take on certain draconic characteristics in their body, like they might get claws, or maybe a tail, or scales might start to form, or something along those lines. That was the idea I've been having. So, haven't got it completely set.
Yeah, it'd be tough to introduce. I'm not saying it's not possible, but we could throw it into our dragon-like race. That's probably the only thing we could probably do. But from a roleplay aspect, that's pretty intense. It'd be very tough to do that. We have dragons in the lore, but they're more like a deity, so they're pretty much untouchable. Which is, in most lore, that's how dragons are. I mean, they're supreme beings, and doing anything with them is near impossible. So
No, I understand where you're coming from with that. And again, that's like I said, they're just the dragon's soul. So I have the whole lore typed out on my page, and it wasn't Skyrim. It's actually from a role playing game. Me and a bunch of friends came up with years back. So, but and I mean, we got a symbol. Oh, trust me, this is way before Skyrim when we came out with this. But I mean, we have our own symbol. There's a history that revolves around it, and it's limited to actually 10 people having this dragon soul. So, like I said, it's not something that everybody out there can get. Only a max of 10 people could potentially have this.
It sounds more
And
like an NPC kind of deal. Like part of storyline quest would happen. That you might have that in, but doesn't sound quite like player implementable. It sounds like it'd be really difficult.
Yeah.
it'd be hard to explain to new people, especially. I understand where you're going with that, definitely, and like from storyline standpoint and NPC standpoint, it would work. But how do you know who has the dragon and stuff? How do you? I mean, there's a lot of things. Like I said, I'm not saying no, but once you get the ideas all hashed out, put it in the idea area, and we'll see if we can make something happen with it.
all right, let me see if I can find the link for the guild page I have for it. Give me a second. Go ahead and talk about
Well,
other
yeah.
stuff. I'll post the link.
So a lot of the common questions with magic are, how to do the incantation. So basically, when you charge a spell, it'll tell you a lot of times, not always, it'll tell you in the rulebook how that spell needs to be charged. As most of you know, we limit magic with mana, and the magic system is far more complex. than we originally anticipated it, but it had to have a lot of options in all the elements without being really, really complex like some of the other game systems. The idea of LarpCraft's Myths and Legends system is not to create a book of 600 spells. We don't want the spells to be running away from us, if you will. We want, from a player standpoint, we want it to be manageable. After a few games, you can kind of understand what it is. And we tried to use names that kind of explain what it is that was happening. It's not, that was harder and harder to do as we came up with the additional magic abilities. But we didn't want the magic to be overpowered. And magic in a lot of games is overpowered. And because you have to burn mana and do all this other stuff, it limits it. And it also puts, the mana potions and all this other stuff and the enchanting and stuff, it puts need on those additional resources. So it creates the economy for those items. But when you do an incant, if it's an instant, you still have to do an incant. It's just instant incant. So you have to actually say what's happening, and then it happens. So, where you throw the spell orb or whatever, you got to still say it. You got to incant it. And it's really nice if you could role play that out. A lot of new players will just, especially in battle when they don't have any experience, they'll go out and, hammer magic spells and just start throwing stuff and say it afterward. And that's tough to role play because the player that's getting hit needs to know what's happening in order for them to role play it correctly. So it takes some practice. Magic is by far one of the things that if you're all about sword and board and you enjoy the medieval combat side, but now we got all this magic stuff. It actually turns people away in some regards. So we try to do it as proactively as possible.
Yeah, I personally found like the concept of magic to be really intimidating. Like when I created my character, like normally, when I play a game or any RPG or MMO or anything like that, I normally play, like a ranger or a mage or something. And I looked at both of them. Well, I mean, it was no tough decision. I had to play a ranger because I mean, just it seemed like a lot to keep up with. And there was a lot of little intricacies and just so much. It seemed confusing almost. I just thought, yeah, I'm not even gonna try that. I mean, I thought I'll get my tail smashed, in my first game as a mage. I mean, I won't last 2 seconds. So I mean, kudos to those out there who are actually doing the whole magic thing, and maybe even successful at it. But yeah, it seems really intimidating and complex, overly complex, almost really.
Yeah, it's for most people who are comfortable with magic and have played other games that involve magic, our system actually looks weak. For those players who never had any intention to do anything magical, it can be almost overwhelming. So we tried to make it as neutral as possible, but still having more than just five spells. The intensity levels and the amount of XP that these skills cost. For a druid to max out, somebody did the math once. It would take them like 12 years if they played one game a month, averaging 1,000 XP or 1,200 or 1,500 XP. So I mean, the combination limits are really good. And magic characters, if you plan on having a character grow for a really long time, a magic character is more progressible for a long time. And that kind of brings us into what was lacking in a lot of the warrior abilities. And it's a reason why we actually put in the professions to have something else that's awesome that wasn't magic. So the professions actually have a lot of different abilities, and it helps players who aren't into the magic thing still do additional abilities that they can buy and train in, and makes the game that much better. But magic is definitely it's an animal. I mean, to learn it and to be able to explain it and to explain it to others as you're doing it is and to role play it. To role play magic well is tough. I've seen, people who got hit with fire and literally burst into flames. and they role played it so well, it almost stopped the game because everybody couldn't figure out what's, he was role playing being on fire and in pain and in agony, like he was burning up in front of everybody. And once everybody understood, holy crap, the amount of immersion that was happening just from that role play, it like sent the game into another level. And it was just awesome to see. Just like Resurrection. Resurrection is, you don't take Resurrection lightly. It is very hard on the cleric. It's, you know, it's performing a miracle. So, uh, it wipes out the cleric. From a role play aspect, that is one of those things where if you're witnessing a resurrection, wow, you could tell your kids about it. You're seeing that. I mean, you could really role play that out, which will bring a lot more realism to the game. So, Magic users, this one's for you. You have more roleplay responsibility in your incantations and what it is you're doing. Players getting hit with magic, same thing applies. Shadow spells are very fun to watch, but are terrible to get hit with. A lot of the spells you'll notice are comical. We've written the spells comical on purpose, and some of like the bard abilities. Some of these things, when they actually take place, you talk about them for weeks out of character because it's just amazing to watch. And, it's lighthearted fun. So watch those incants and make sure that you can role play those abilities and try to keep working on it. Nobody's an actor when you first start up, typically. So it takes a little bit to learn how to do that. And we're still making the movies, we're still making the videos, and we'll continue to make videos on how to do each one of those magic spells. So like we'll do a video on all the fire magics in one take. So it'll be 10 minutes of nothing but how each fire magic will be performed, how it's incanted, how it's thrown, and how the victim responds. So you'll get an idea of how that works. And those videos, we've started shooting some of them, and they're hilarious. You almost can't get through them because it's so much fun when you're actually doing it that the camera, you get, it's like, why bother? You can't get through it without laughing. So we're still working on it, but we want to have good examples for each chapter. And magic is going to be the hardest chapter because it's got the most complexity in those skill sets without it being, very obvious, like a weaponsmith or a leathersmith or a blacksmith or apothecary. I mean, you kind of understand. Oh yeah, all right, I get what that is. But the magic stuff is it's got some complexity.
Hey, our tenant, you remember I told you about before I joined LarpCraft how me and a couple of friends were designing our own LARP?
Yeah.
We actually came up with a thing for the magic where you the basic gist of it is you actually create your own spells from the ground up. You pick if it's going to be like what element it'll be and what its effect is going to be, and you pick all these things from a specific list, and the list had a certain number of points to it. The more points that was totaled up on that list, the more complex the spell would be, usually because it was more powerful. So the longer the casting cost took, because you had to add enough word, each point represented, like, certain number of points represented each time, casting time. There we go. That's the phrase I'm looking for. And so you had to add enough words to fill up that casting time. Anything shorter, and obviously the spell wouldn't work. Anything, well, if you did it longer, that wouldn't be that big of a deal. But I mean, it's an idea to where you set like the casting time is like 3 seconds. Well, on average, that's about 3 words. So, a person can just make up their own magical words or something to go with it that'll help them count out, the timing for the spell and how long it takes to cast it.
Yeah. And we plan on talking about how that works in those videos and examples of casting duration. And I've also experienced other magic users coming up with their own incantations and then saying the actual what it's doing right as they throw it or right before they throw it. And that works fine too. Because like you said, you don't want to just keep repeating the word over and over if you're doing a massive spell. You got to come up with a whole phrase. And like when my Artenin character pulls out a justice spell, that's mortal wound unblockable. I mean, I got a whole, power of the light, blessing, blah blah blah, without getting into religion stuff. And it's complex. Like if I'm being charged, I'm not going to pull a justice spell because I wouldn't have time to do it. So, in a sense, Neander, that's already in there, but we don't specify a lot of the spells with specific times. We left it general and open to interpretation because otherwise you're going to have players out there, and we did. We had players out there when we had absolute time limits on things. It's like they had stopwatches. You only went 3 seconds and it's a 4-second spell. I'm not going to take the damage. I mean, it like blows away all the immersion part, but you start getting these technical players in there. I understand that the system in itself, when we have generalization like that, is frustrating because you don't know, you have questions on it. But that's why each chapter has a question section so we can talk out those differences as a group. And those questions were great and have changed the system as it's progressing. So we try again. Who is our target market? Can somebody tell who's our target player for LarpCraft? Does anybody know? Don't all speak at once. I know. The target player is the gamer, but not necessarily the LARPer. The gamer who understands the fun of going to a Ren fair, playing an online game, playing a console game, and they want to bring it to life. That's our target market. A lot of those folks, when you start getting into major complexities like that, it may not be something they want to try to tackle. So we got to try to make it as friendly as we can for those gamers to try to get them into the system. And if they're looking for something more complex, some of them have gone to other systems as well, and that's fine. We got them into the game, and that's our goal. So the LarpCraft system isn't for everybody. We try to make it as broad as we can and make it user base progressing, so all of us decide as a group with votes what happens. My job as a mediator, as an overlord, is to make sure that those things that are progressing stay in a systematic sense so that they can be playable, and so our target market doesn't lose, so we don't lose our target market. It goes back to, why do you see in some of these games where there's 2, 3, 4, 8, 10,000 people? Well, that stuff didn't happen overnight. These groups didn't organize overnight. What you're seeing is a collaboration of 20 years in the gaming industry. But people don't realize that, especially in the US. So we try to explain that, and we try to have a game system that's easy enough for everybody to understand, and so we can travel between games and grow bigger games and then get regional games and then have, whole country games and then have worldwide games. I mean, we have a system set up to build the system that way in all of our different types of live action role play that we do. But I always try to take a step back from a lot of the complex stuff. And if we're going to change like a magic, I'll always say, well, if we want to put this magic spell in, what can we take out? Do we have to have that in if this is in? Something like that. So that way the system never gets so, like, I don't want to create a LarpCraft Myths and Legends rulebook that's 300 pages. That is not the intent of Now we might have 300 pages worth of lore, and that's cool. People are literally writing books in our lore section, and that's fantastic. That's what we wanted. We want it to be role play. We want it to be lore based. We don't want it to be, well, there's 68 points of damage here, and there's 48,000 spells, and we want it to be role play. We don't want it to be system play. So I apologize for the rambling, but I think that needs to be said more often as to what the focus of LarpCraft is, so people understand it. Because when they understand it, again, they can contribute more accurately, and they know what the vision is. We want to be able to give the promoter, like yourselves, the chance to go from 2 people to 200 people to maybe 2,000 people. So if you have the resources and you have the drive and the motivation to do it, LarpCraft is here to help you do it. So without the ridiculous amount of, trying to connect everybody is hard. And it's
Sorry, Kale here. So you said you want to be very lore focused and less system focused or technically focused. Do you think that LarpCraft or a system like this, LarpCraft specifically, would ever see metagamers? People who get into this really competitively.
Yeah, they're gonna, and that's why we progress the character profile. So if you go to edit your profile, if you go to edit your profile, you can actually have a journal. You can actually take some things back out again. You can put specific things you don't want people to see.
Join back in. Yeah.
So I'm talking about people who are every season or every whatever, they're making a new character because they feel like this class is going to be more viable to play or anything like that because of any changes that may have occurred. Do you believe we'll ever see people like that playing the game, or do you think it'll always be very lore based and more based on role play rather than combat?
Without pissing everybody off, everybody's a rule Nazi. In their own way, shape, or form, there's going to be certain aspects of the game that they're going to care more about, and they're going to Nazi that, and that's okay. We understand that, and a lot of those very strong concerns have changed the game. Will we have just 100% lore? No, I mean it's got to have a system. We just try to build the system as minimalistic as possible, but have enough gooey information to help characters get built, to help players. Without enough info, you can't build the character correctly. So I think we have, with rulebook 3.5, I mean that's a good work of art right there. That's taken us a lot, and it's in some respects not nearly as good as some other systems. In other respects, it's a shining star compared to other systems. But in reality, it's very playable, yet it's very complex. So it's a pretty decent blend. And I don't think I answered your question at all. Maybe I don't understand. Maybe rephrase the question.
Okay. Like you say, you want the game to be heavily role play based, but do you think we'll ever see a group of players who just basically want to shit on the lore, don't really give a crap about it, and they play the game for competitive reasons? For instance, maybe every season or every whatever, they're making a new character so they can play a different class because they believe that one will be more competitive, or they do everything or their motives behind playing the game are strictly competitive, and they really get into the combat system and how all that works. Do you think we'll ever see players like that, or do we already?
I would say probably half the players in the system are combat oriented. That's why there's a lot of combat in the rule set, because it still applies to a lot of the combat folks. There's a lot of cool combat abilities that you can't get, but it's still role playable. And what we try to teach elders is that people want to burn off some steam. So to create a good, successful game, you got to have a lot of stuff for the role players to do, and the questers, and the people who don't fight. And you got to have tournaments, capture the flags, motives. You got to have go get the bad guy stuff. You got to have stuff for the combat players too. So if you keep both type of player in mind, you can blend a game to where all of that is possible. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was yeah, that was beautiful. I feel like you really got to the point there, and
That time, yeah.
yeah. Well, I mean, I didn't mind the other one before. I mean, really, what you said before, I took into consideration, and I felt like what you put in was really good. And you may have talked about something else, but again, also good words. So thank you for both responses.
Sure. And a lot of people see LarpCraft because we put a lot of lore on the site. They see that as metagaming. And we're trying to make people understand this is no different than, getting the note off the crow, foxing a message from village to village, going into the ancient scrolls of some big castle and reading up on the history of something. That's what the scrolls are for. That's why we named the forums are essentially the scrolls for that reason. Because we want you to use it. We want you to go into a game and, learn about the location, learn about the factions, learn about the lore, learn about the politics. So when you get to the game, you're not a bumbling idiot coming into a game. I mean, you can kind of understand some of the stuff. You won't know the faces, you won't know maybe the colors or the guild tabards and that kind of stuff, but you'll understand a lot of the history stuff if that's the type of player you are. Some players, like you said, combat players who don't give two licks about the story, that's fine too. Come on in. You'll just
Vice versa. So how does that work? Lore with other people's lore. I mean, are we going to be butting heads constantly? All these lore writers and whatnot.
That's the part of the system that's still being developed. And a good example of how we think it will work is if you look at how the approval process goes, if you jump into the religion section of lore. We started with the religion because that can screw up the game faster than any other part from what we've seen in other games. The religion, the fake religion, has destroyed entire LARP groups for some reason. So we wanted to really define that and nip it in the butt first. So there's a process. So when there's official lore going into the whole scheme of things, you submit your lore, and then it gets approved by an elder or an overlord or a moderator. So like there are a few core elders who can approve lore for the whole world. We want to make it where there's a lore approval process for each colony as well. And the only stuff that goes into the actual approve lore is what the chief elder and the other elders approve. So you as a lore writer won't have to worry about butting heads with some of your players because you will have the control of the lore of your system. Now, when you talk at a region, like Wisconsin has, just as an example, 5, 6, 7 colonies. Eventually, we're going to have probably 10. The lore of the region, of the whole region of the colonies, might butt heads a little bit. And we may have to revise it. But that's the key here is communication between the chief elders of each colony to make sure that they get together once in a while. And that's what the regional coordinator is for. The regional coordinator is going to take a look at lore and those types of things and make sure that it kind of all complies a little bit. It's not going to, the lore of a whole colony and a lore of, the 4 colonies around it, they will touch on certain things. Some of the stuff is not going to be accurate. Some of the stuff could be straight out lies, but that's lore. Lore doesn't have to be true. Lore is lore. It's written in, whoever wrote it. So it's not going to be too much of a problem. But we wanted to make it so that each colony has complete control of their lore that they have. So a good example of that is Eludia. Eludia has a lot of lore that originally they were trying to put it into the world lore, and eventually it came to, oh, that actually belongs more in your colony lore. So we kind of had to move some stuff, but then that worked out really well. You guys down in Texas and Missouri and a couple others are really starting to get your colony lore to the part where, I could spend a whole evening over a cup of joe and, have a good time reading your lore because it's so well written and there's such a history on it already. And then you come to the inland waters colony and you're going to have lore that might be a paragraph, and it's written that way specifically because though we don't know the history comes out through each game. So you can do it either way. There's absolutely no wrong way to do it. And having a sufficient amount of lore to start with will entice more of the role player type people to perhaps get into the game more.
So, okay, I was just making sure because, like, I thought you were about to tell me that, like, all the lore I was writing specifically for my colony was, like, going to be, null and void. Like, it wouldn't matter because there's already some pre-existing world lore that applies to everybody regardless of colony. And, I was going to kind of be kind of mad because I spend like 3 to 4 hours, on each piece of lore, and I kind of work hard on it, so just making sure I wasn't doing all this for nothing because I feel like as lore writer, I got hired onto a great job.
Yeah, and it's a fun job, and it's very rewarding to have that kind of lore written. So yeah, somebody take a note. Let's put a elder chat together about lore and lore writing. I think that's a good topic to write it to make a tavern talk about. Someone could write that in the scrolls section of the elder section.
I'll go post it right quick. Give me a minute
That way
or
we
two.
won't forget, and we can get that hammered in there. So eventually, we want to have Tavern Talk podcasts on everything. We just want to make it in the right section because we have so much stuff in the scrolls that it's constantly being adjusted to try to make it as findable as possible. And because you got over 2,000 different topics now, it's if you don't post it in the right section, it can be tough. So if you see something that doesn't fit and you can't move it yourself, contact one of the elders or contact our tenant here and say, hey, this probably belongs in this section, so we can move it so it's easier to find. And the bigger the system gets, the harder it is to manage those things. So we just try to keep the rule book at least straight and the place to, what the game forms are and how to do stuff, all that as simplistic as possible. It's not there yet, but it's getting there. And the lore approval process and all that stuff, user permissions and such, again, that's still being tweaked. So constant improvement. The game never stops growing and changing and adapting. And it's all based on the players. So some of the other magic that people have questions about, if something is unblockable means if it comes in contact with you, you take the damage or you take the effect. It doesn't mean you can't jump out of the way. You can if you see a spell coming, you can definitely get out of the way. And it's dodging a spell is a lot different than it being unblockable. So that was that question's come up a few times. The intensity of a magic will be directly related to how powerful a spellcaster is. If you see a spellcaster with 10 mana bands on their belt, you're looking at what, 50,000 or more XP. So just by the amount of mana bands you see on that, let's just say mage's belt, you can visually see that spellcaster probably has a decent amount of spells that can screw you up fairly efficiently. That's really cool. It's visual. You can still see that your enemy is probably stronger or weaker than you. Just like if somebody comes in full plate armor, well, yeah, they have a lot of hit points because you can see they got a lot of plate armor on. So magic is visual just as armor is visual, and we wanted to keep the game that way so it's more role playable. You know, very rarely would you see somebody pulling out their character sheet. Typically, when you pull out your character sheet, it's, well, I had a question on something, or it's usually an elder question. It's not a player-to-player question. The Skin of Wood spell, the green spell that allows the spellcaster to role play literally the nature of wood being drawn to your body to give you like chest armor or torso armor or arm armor or whatever. Skin of Wood is a really awesome ability, but again, common problem. People will get hit with a spell and then say, or get hit with a blade, and then the caster will say Skin of Wood. Well, that's great. You just cast it, but you took the damage. You can't say it after it hits you. You have to have it on. It's like it's a buff, It's like armor. Armor has to be on you before you take, before it does anything. So, and people have been really good about asking questions about magic. And if there's any other questions, chapter 10 questions, post them in there. And there's a lot of folks that will help you out with that. So anybody have any other questions about magic? Without getting into specifics. Because again, the videos are going to cover each one of these specifically, and there's going to be a video for each element. And there is talk about spell balls. Have you had any good response to the spell balls available on live action products? Yes. We developed the spell orbs based on player feedback. We needed a spell orb that flew well, but wasn't a beanbag, that hit hard enough where you registered it, but didn't have corners on it where you didn't get a frickin' beanbag sock in the eye. And that's how the spell orbs came about. And now we started putting like that skull spell orb and stuff. You would have no idea how many revisions that had to go through to make it fly with the head flowing straight. But and then the tails that we put on them. The tails are again, with the way we do the cores with those, we wanted it to be able to be thrown by the tail, because if you take the heaviest part of the object, which is the foam, and hold on to the tail, the weight is at the end of the object. It gives you more inertia when you spin it and throw it. Throwing it by the tail, you can literally get twice as much distance out of it. But it's like a sling. It's harder to aim. So it takes practice. So, and then some of the group said, well, can you make the spell orb heavier? So we came up with the Magnum, which is a heavier version. It's 50% heavier, because some of the folks in full armor didn't know they were getting hit by it because they couldn't feel it. Well, and they couldn't hear it either. So we made it a little bit, but we tried a 2-ounce one, and that was too hard. You get smashed in the face with a 2-ounce spell orb, and could be a game over situation for that day. So the only way to test that is with Ronan, Odin, and myself, and going into Fight Club mode of, I want you to hit me as hard as you can. And it was learning curve process. And we have some other different orbs in the works. You're gonna love them. We even experimented with glow in the dark orbs. That failed because the amount of phosphorus you have to put in the foam to make it glow long enough. You almost have to charge it behind your back and then throw. And then again, it just like you lose the immersion part. So I mean, there's just a lot of things that we were experimenting with, but the orb itself was working good. and it's got that medieval feel. It's not perfect. It's not, we're trying to make it as orb-like as possible. And I actually gave you a little on the orbs that you ordered. I actually threw in a little bit of a silver streak on them to give it a cool, different look to it. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised, hopefully. So, anybody else have any questions on the magic?
All right, I got you one. We were debating the other night and kind of decided as a crew, but I figured I'd post it up. Just hadn't had the time. With resurrection bands, you can wear as many as a healer or caster. If you have the resurrection ability, you could probably have as many resurrection bands as you want. But once you run out of mana, you can't resurrect anybody. So there's really no limit or no skill to buy them for that reason, right?
All right. It's a fun little exercise. If you go to the Medieval Fantasy Rulebook and jump into Chapter 4, which is Classes, because this is actually under the Clerics section. And about halfway down, we got the Clerics. And that's a good question. The Cleric Resurrection Band rule has been revised a few times. So, because the Cleric must use mana bands in conjunction with their healing powers, you're right. It's limited by, it doesn't matter how many resurrection bands you have, it's still a magic spell, so it still has the limitation of mana. Now, if we jump down to Resurrection itself, it talks a little bit more about that. Just before the Death Knight section, incantation should take about 10 minutes. Should take about, and again, when we put minutes in there, we always say about or may, and always think about it like we try to not speak in absolutes in that regard. So they can't. The cleric is unable to fight for 5 minutes after the resurrection, but can stagger and walk around. Again, they took literally everything out of them. They must use a pure white resurrection band during the procedure. Give it to the target character. The target character must wear the resurrection band like it would be a life band. So it's a white touch spell that uses 1 mana band, which is a heck of a deal for that hefty of a spell. But it is a very hard spell to get 8,500 XP at the time of this recording, and level 5. So not, answering the question is one thing. Teaching you how to find the answer to the question is more important. So, look at, and if you have a question, don't feel bad if you don't know is that a magic question or is that a ability question. You can ask it in the shout box, and a lot of players will know the answer to it, so they can help you out. Don't feel intimidated or that your lack of knowledge is going to be somehow shunned, or we try to keep it in LarpCraft, in the scrolls especially, to keep it from becoming a pissing match or picking on each other. And there are some players that are very targeted right now as to whether or not they're going to be allowed to keep posting. But it's very, very infrequent that would happen. So, and on the backside, elders can put up warnings on your profile that you may or may not be able to see, so other moderators can actually see the things that are happening. And there's a history, there's a tracking record of things that bad posters are doing. And some of them aren't bad posters, they just don't know any better. So remedial training is a vital element to LarpCraft. Again, 10-minute answer, which could have been answered in 30 seconds. You're welcome. Did that answer your question?
It reinforced the answer that I had currently, yes.
All right. the resurrection bands on the cleric don't have to be visible. So a cleric treats resurrection bands as someone who has triage treats a bandage. They have it, but it doesn't have to be visible because it's not active. You can't loot it. It doesn't represent anything until the magic is conjured to represent the resurrection itself. Okay, and we'll have more chat sessions about this, and feel free to come on to TeamSpeak at any time. We're here to answer your questions. There's a lot of elders that are on, and if nobody's on, come on to TeamSpeak anyway, because we can see on LarpCraft when somebody's on TeamSpeak, and you could actually even change your name to say, I would like to talk to somebody. You can literally change your name to that, and one of the elders or one of the players will start coming on in response to that. So we are here, even if we're not on TeamSpeak. We can see what's happening in TeamSpeak. So jump in and get engaged because we're able to help you. If nobody else has any other questions about magic, we will wrap up this Tavern Talk session, and we thank you for coming out. The players who have been on the TeamSpeak will get the experience points and coin, which I will assign just after we quit the recording. So if you want to get experience, these are some things you can do to do it. Be involved, be part of the TeamSpeak, be part of the Hangouts, be part of the roleplay sessions that are done globally on LarpCraft. You can gain a lot of experience points just by being involved in the community. So with that, I bid you adieu. Everyone, say goodbye.
Good evening.
Good night.